Question 1. Process analysis reveals that a primary care physician has requested specific patient information from a hospital's electronic health record system to facilitate ongoing care coordination for a patient who was recently discharged. The hospital's privacy officer is reviewing the request to ensure compliance with federal regulations. What is the most appropriate course of action for the hospital to take regarding the disclosure of the patient's protected health information? 5. Option A. Refuse to disclose any PHI to the primary care physician, citing patient privacy concerns, without further investigation into the specific nature of the request and relevant HIPAA provisions. Option B. Obtain a broad, general authorization from the patient allowing the hospital to share their PHI with any healthcare provider for any purpose, before considering the disclosure. Option C. Disclose the entire patient medical record to the primary care physician to ensure they have all necessary information, as this demonstrates a commitment to comprehensive patient care. Option D. Disclose the minimum necessary PHI to the primary care physician that is relevant to the patient's ongoing treatment and care coordination, as this is a permitted disclosure under HIPAA for treatment and healthcare operations. The correct answer is D. Disclose the minimum necessary PHI to the primary care physician that is relevant to the patient's ongoing treatment and care coordination, as this is a permitted disclosure under HIPAA for treatment and healthcare operations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between patient privacy rights, healthcare provider obligations, and the specific regulatory framework governing health information. The core challenge lies in balancing the need to protect sensitive patient data with the potential benefits of sharing that data for care coordination or research, all while adhering to strict legal mandates. Misinterpreting or misapplying these regulations can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPAA) privacy rule. This rule permits the disclosure of protected health information (PHI) for specific purposes such as treatment, payment, and healthcare operations, without explicit patient authorization, provided certain conditions are met. In this case, sharing information for the purpose of coordinating care with another provider directly involved in the patient's treatment falls squarely within the definition of healthcare operations and treatment. The key is to ensure that only the minimum necessary information is shared to achieve the intended purpose. This approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes patient well-being and continuity of care while remaining compliant with federal law, thereby safeguarding patient rights and maintaining the integrity of the healthcare system. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to refuse to share any information, citing patient privacy, without first assessing if the disclosure is permitted under HIPAA. This failure stems from a misunderstanding of HIPAA exceptions for treatment and healthcare operations. Ethically, it can impede necessary care coordination, potentially harming the patient. Legally, it could be seen as a failure to cooperate in providing appropriate care, though the primary failure is the misapplication of privacy rules. Another incorrect approach would be to share the entire patient medical record with the referring physician without a specific assessment of what information is truly necessary for the patient's ongoing care. This violates the HIPAA privacy rules' minimum necessary standard. The regulatory failure is the overdisclosure of PHI, which can lead to unauthorized access and potential misuse of sensitive patient data. Ethically, it breaches patient trust and privacy beyond what is required for their treatment. A third incorrect approach would be to obtain a broad, non-specific authorization from the patient to share their information with any healthcare provider for any reason. While an authorization is a valid way to permit disclosure, a vague authorization may not meet the specificity requirements of HIPAA and could still lead to overdisclosure. The regulatory failure lies in not ensuring the authorization is sufficiently specific to the intended use and disclosure. Ethically, it may not fully inform the patient of how their data will be used, undermining informed consent. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the purpose of the information request. Next, they must consult the relevant regulations, in this case, HIPAA, to determine if the disclosure is permitted under existing rules or requires patient authorization. If permitted, the professional must then apply the minimum necessary standard to ensure only the essential information is shared. If authorization is required, they must ensure it is specific, informed, and voluntary. Documenting the rationale for any disclosure is also a critical step in demonstrating compliance and professional diligence. Question 2. Implementation of a new predictive analytics initiative to identify patients at high risk for readmission requires access to historical patient data. What is the most compliant and ethically sound approach to ensure patient privacy while enabling this analysis? Option A. Obtain explicit written consent from every patient whose data will be included in the analysis, even if the data is to be de-identified. Option B. Utilize de-identified and aggregated patient data, ensuring no individual can be re-identified, for the predictive modeling. Option C. Share raw, identifiable patient data with a third-party analytics vendor under a standard business associate agreement without specific de-identification protocols. Option D. Access and analyze individual patient electronic health records directly, relying on the internal understanding that this data is for internal improvement purposes only. The correct answer is B. Utilize de-identified and aggregated patient data, ensuring no individual can be re-identified, for the predictive modeling. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to data privacy and security within a healthcare organization, specifically concerning the handling of protected health information. 5. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient data analysis to improve patient care with the stringent legal and ethical obligations to protect patient confidentiality. A misstep can lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with applicable regulations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted strategy that prioritizes de-identification and aggregation of PHI before it is used for analysis. This aligns with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA privacy rule, which permits the use and disclosure of de-identified health information for research and other purposes without patient authorization. By employing robust de-identification techniques and ensuring data is aggregated to prevent re-identification, the organization upholds its commitment to patient privacy while still enabling valuable data-driven insights. This approach demonstrates best professional practice by proactively mitigating privacy risks and adhering to regulatory mandates. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly accessing and analyzing individual patient records without implementing appropriate safeguards or de-identification measures. This directly violates HIPAA privacy rule, which establishes strict standards for the use and disclosure of PHI. Failure to de-identify or obtain necessary authorizations constitutes a significant regulatory failure and an ethical breach of patient confidentiality. Another incorrect approach might be to rely solely on internal policies that are less stringent than federal regulations like HIPAA. While internal policies are important, they must at a minimum comply with all applicable laws. An approach that permits broader access or less rigorous de-identification than legally required would be a regulatory failure, exposing the organization to penalties. A third incorrect approach could be to delay or forego data analysis altogether due to privacy concerns, without exploring legally permissible methods. While caution is understandable, this approach fails to leverage valuable data for improving patient outcomes, which is a core objective of healthcare organizations. It represents a failure in professional problem-solving by not seeking compliant solutions. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a risk-based decision-making framework. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulatory requirements, e.g., HIPAA. 2. Assessing the potential risks to patient privacy associated with different data handling methods. 3. Evaluating available technical and administrative safeguards, such as de-identification techniques and access controls. 4. Consulting with legal and compliance experts to ensure proposed solutions meet all regulatory obligations. 5. Implementing the chosen approach with robust monitoring and auditing to ensure ongoing compliance. Question 3. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a data breach and a high impact if protected health information, PHI, is compromised. Your organization is seeking to reduce operational costs by outsourcing certain IT functions, including data storage and processing, to a third-party vendor. Several vendors have submitted proposals, with one offering significantly lower pricing than the others. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with U.S. healthcare regulations and protect patient data? Option A. Proceed with the lowest bidding vendor without a formal business associate agreement (BA), relying on their verbal assurances of HIPAA compliance. Option B. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment of all potential vendors, focusing on their data protection measures, access controls, encryption capabilities, and their willingness to sign a robust business associate agreement (BA) that clearly outlines their responsibilities for safeguarding PHI. Option C. Select the vendor with the lowest bid immediately, as cost savings are a primary objective, and assume that all reputable cloud service providers adhere to similar security standards. Option D. Prioritize the vendor that offers the most extensive list of features, assuming that a feature-rich service inherently provides superior data security. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough security and compliance assessment of all potential vendors, focusing on their data protection measures, access controls, encryption capabilities, and their willingness to sign a robust business associate agreement (BA) that clearly outlines their responsibilities for safeguarding PHI. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for cost savings with the long-term implications of data security and patient privacy, all within the stringent regulatory environment of the U.S. healthcare system, specifically HIPAA. The pressure to reduce operational expenses can lead to shortcuts that, if not carefully evaluated, could result in significant compliance violations and reputational damage. The complexity lies in identifying third-party vendors who can meet cost targets without compromising the protected health information (PHI) entrusted to them. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough due diligence process that aligns with HIPAA security rule and privacy rule. This involves a comprehensive assessment of potential vendors' security measures, data handling policies, and their willingness and ability to sign a business associate agreement (BA). A BAA is a legally binding contract that ensures the vendor will appropriately safeguard PHI. This approach demonstrates a commitment to patient privacy and regulatory compliance, mitigating the risk of data breaches and associated penalties. It reflects a proactive stance on risk management, ensuring that cost-saving initiatives do not inadvertently create new vulnerabilities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately selecting the vendor with the lowest bid without a comprehensive security review. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it bypasses the fundamental requirement under HIPAA to ensure that any entity handling PHI has adequate safeguards in place. It prioritizes cost over compliance, creating a high risk of a data breach and violating the principle of safeguarding patient information. Another incorrect approach is to assume that all vendors offering cloud storage have equivalent security standards. This is a failure to exercise due diligence and understand the nuances of data security and compliance. Different cloud providers have varying levels of security certifications, data encryption protocols, and access controls, all of which are critical for HIPAA compliance. Relying on such assumptions can lead to the selection of a vendor that is not adequately equipped to protect PHI. A third incorrect approach is to proceed with a vendor without a signed BAA, even if they claim to be HIPAA compliant. This is a direct violation of HIPAA regulations. The BAA is the cornerstone of the business associate relationship, clearly defining the responsibilities of both parties regarding the protection of PHI. Without it, there is no legal recourse or assurance that the vendor will adhere to the required standards, exposing the organization to substantial legal and financial risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing this situation should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the compliance requirements, HIPAA in this case. This should be followed by establishing objective criteria for vendor evaluation that include both cost and security/compliance factors. A risk-based approach is essential, where potential vendors are assessed for their ability to meet security standards and their willingness to enter into a BAA. Documentation of the entire evaluation process is crucial for demonstrating due diligence and compliance. When faced with competing priorities like cost savings and compliance, professionals must always err on the side of caution and prioritize regulatory adherence and patient privacy. Question 4. Compliance review shows that a new patient engagement platform is being considered for rapid deployment to improve patient communication. The vendor claims the platform is secure and user-friendly, but has not provided detailed documentation on their data encryption methods or their compliance with HIPAA Business Associate Agreement requirements. The IT department is eager to implement the platform to meet marketing goals. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement the platform with a temporary, less stringent data handling protocol, with plans to upgrade to full compliance once the initial rollout is complete and user feedback is gathered. Option B. Rely on the IT department's internal assessment of the platform's security features, as they are technically proficient and can identify potential vulnerabilities without external legal or compliance input. Option C. Proceed with the implementation, assuming the vendor's claims of security are sufficient, and address any compliance issues that may arise post-deployment. Option D. Halt the deployment and conduct a thorough due diligence process, including a detailed review of the vendor's security protocols, data handling practices, and a comprehensive business associate agreement, before any further steps are taken. The correct answer is C. Proceed with the implementation, assuming the vendor's claims of security are sufficient, and address any compliance issues that may arise post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between business objectives and the stringent requirements of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security within the healthcare sector. The need to quickly integrate new technology while safeguarding protected health information. 5. Requires a nuanced approach that prioritizes patient trust and legal obligations over expediency. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a proactive and comprehensive commitment to regulatory adherence. By involving legal and compliance teams early, conducting a thorough risk assessment, and ensuring the vendor meets all HIPAA security rule requirements, the organization is mitigating potential breaches and demonstrating due diligence. This aligns with the core principles of HIPAA, which mandate the protection of PHI through administrative, physical, and technical safeguards. Furthermore, establishing clear data handling protocols and training staff reinforces the organization's commitment to ongoing compliance and ethical data stewardship. An incorrect approach that prioritizes immediate implementation without adequate vetting fails to uphold the organization's responsibility under HIPAA. This could lead to significant regulatory penalties, reputational damage, and a loss of patient confidence. Specifically, failing to verify the vendor's business associate agreement, BA, compliance is a direct violation of HIPAA, as it means the organization has not ensured that a third party handling PHI is also bound by the same privacy and security standards. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the functionality of the new system without assessing its security posture, ignores the critical requirement to implement appropriate technical safeguards as mandated by the HIPAA security rule. This oversight can expose PHI to unauthorized access or breaches. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying all relevant regulatory obligations, e.g., HIPAA High-Tech Act. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment that considers potential threats to data privacy and security. Engaging legal and compliance experts early in the process is crucial for interpreting regulations and ensuring adherence. Prioritizing a vendor's security certifications and willingness to sign a robust BAA is paramount. Finally, establishing clear internal policies and ongoing training programs ensures that compliance is not a one-time event, but an integrated part of daily operations. Question 5. The efficiency study reveals that a new cloud-based data storage solution could significantly reduce operational costs for managing patient records. However, the proposed solution involves transferring large volumes of sensitive protected health information, PHI, to a third-party vendor whose data security protocols are not fully detailed in their initial proposal. The IT department is eager to implement this cost-saving measure quickly. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and protect patient data? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the cloud solution, including a thorough review of the vendor's security policies, data handling procedures, and compliance certifications, and ensure a business associate agreement, BA, is in place that clearly outlines HIPAA responsibilities before migrating any PHI. Option B. Implement the cloud solution for non-sensitive data first, and only consider migrating PHI after a significant period of successful operation and further investigation into the vendor's security, without necessarily requiring a formal BAA initially. Option C. Negotiate a reduced service fee with the vendor based on the potential cost savings identified, and prioritize the migration of PHI to the new system to demonstrate the efficiency gains to stakeholders, deferring detailed security reviews until after implementation. Option D. Proceed with the migration to the new cloud solution immediately to realize cost savings, assuming the vendor has standard industry security practices, and address any potential compliance issues after the system is operational. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the cloud solution, including a thorough review of the vendor's security policies, data handling procedures, and compliance certifications, and ensure a business associate agreement, BA, is in place that clearly outlines HIPAA responsibilities before migrating any PHI. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the pursuit of operational efficiency with stringent regulatory compliance, specifically concerning patient data privacy and security under U.S. federal law, primarily HIPAA. The pressure to implement cost-saving measures must not override the legal and ethical obligations to protect protected health information. 5. Careful judgment is required to identify solutions that achieve efficiency without compromising patient confidentiality or data integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of robust security controls before adopting new technologies. This aligns directly with HIPAA security rule, which mandates administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI. By seeking expert consultation and ensuring vendor compliance, the organization demonstrates a commitment to due diligence and proactive risk management, thereby safeguarding patient data and avoiding potential breaches and associated penalties. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without adequate security vetting fails to meet HIPAA requirements for risk analysis and mitigation. This could lead to unauthorized access, disclosure, or breaches of PHI, resulting in significant fines, reputational damage, and loss of patient trust. Another incorrect approach that involves bypassing established data handling protocols, even for perceived efficiency gains, directly violates HIPAA privacy rule and security rule, which govern the use and disclosure of PHI and require appropriate safeguards. Such actions demonstrate a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical responsibilities. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the regulatory landscape relevant to the situation. This involves understanding applicable laws and guidelines, e.g., HIPAA in the U.S. Next, they should assess the potential risks and benefits of any proposed action, particularly concerning data security and patient privacy. Seeking expert advice, conducting thorough due diligence on vendors or technologies, and ensuring all implemented solutions have built-in compliance mechanisms are crucial steps. Finally, maintaining clear documentation of the decision-making process and the rationale behind chosen solutions is essential for accountability and auditability. Question 6. Investigation of a new marketing initiative aimed at increasing patient engagement and market share for a health insurance provider, which proposes to leverage aggregated patient demographic and claims data to tailor outreach messages. The marketing team believes the initiative will significantly boost enrollment, but has not yet conducted a detailed review of how this data usage aligns with HIPAA regulations and state-specific privacy laws. What is the most appropriate course of action for the compliance department? Option A. Proceed with the marketing campaign, assuming that existing general marketing consent forms are sufficient to cover the use of patient data for targeted outreach. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed marketing initiative against all applicable federal and state privacy regulations, including HIPAA, to ensure proper authorizations, de-identification, and marketing content compliance before proceeding. Option C. Prioritize the speed of market entry and allow the legal department to address any potential compliance issues after the campaign has been launched. Option D. De-identify the patient data by removing obvious identifiers and launch the marketing campaign immediately to capitalize on the market opportunity. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the proposed marketing initiative against all applicable federal and state privacy regulations, including HIPAA, to ensure proper authorizations, de-identification, and marketing content compliance before proceeding. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business objective, increasing market share, and the imperative of regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and marketing practices. The pressure to achieve aggressive growth targets can tempt individuals to overlook or minimize regulatory risks, making careful judgment and adherence to established guidelines paramount. The complexity arises from interpreting and applying the nuances of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and related state privacy laws to a new marketing initiative. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the proposed marketing campaign against all applicable federal and state privacy regulations, including HIPAA privacy rule and any relevant state data breach notification laws or consumer protection statutes. This includes assessing whether the campaign involves the use or disclosure of protected health information, FI, and if so, ensuring that appropriate authorizations or de-identification methods are in place. It also requires evaluating the marketing content for accuracy, fairness, and non-deceptiveness, aligning with the Federal Trade Commission's, FTC, guidelines on advertising and consumer protection, which are indirectly relevant to healthcare marketing practices. This proactive, compliance-first strategy safeguards the organization from legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust, representing best professional practice by prioritizing ethical conduct and legal adherence over short-term gains. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the marketing campaign based solely on the assumption that existing general marketing consent forms are sufficient. This fails to recognize that HIPAA and specific state laws often require explicit, informed consent for the use of PHI for marketing purposes, particularly when it involves sharing data with third-party marketers. This approach risks violating HIPAA privacy rule by improperly disclosing PHI without proper authorization. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the campaign by de-identifying the data without a robust and documented de-identification methodology that meets HIPAA standards. Simply removing obvious identifiers may not be sufficient to prevent re-identification, leading to a potential breach of privacy. This approach ignores the strict requirements for de-identification under HIPAA, which can result in significant penalties if the data is later deemed identifiable. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize the speed of market entry over a comprehensive compliance review, relying on the legal department to clean up any issues later. This demonstrates a disregard for the proactive nature of regulatory compliance. It exposes the organization to substantial legal and financial liabilities, including fines, lawsuits, and corrective action plans, and severely damages its reputation. It also signals a culture that tolerates regulatory risk, which is ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a structured decision-making process. First, identify all relevant regulations and guidelines applicable to the proposed activity. Second, conduct a risk assessment, evaluating potential violations and their consequences. Third, consult with legal and compliance experts to interpret the regulations and assess the proposed actions. Fourth, develop and implement mitigation strategies to address identified risks, ensuring all actions align with legal and ethical standards. Finally, document all decisions, analyses, and actions taken to demonstrate due diligence and maintain an audit trail. This systematic approach ensures that business objectives are pursued responsibly and within the bounds of the law. Question 7. What factors determine the appropriate handling of patient health information for internal quality improvement initiatives versus external marketing outreach by a healthcare organization operating under U.S. federal regulations? Option A. The perceived benefit of the initiative to the healthcare organization's overall market position. Option B. The potential for financial gain derived from the use of patient health information for any purpose. Option C. The necessity of obtaining explicit patient authorization for any use or disclosure of protected health information, FI, that falls outside of standard treatment, payment, and healthcare operations, particularly for marketing purposes. Option D. The ease with which patient health information can be anonymized for research purposes. Correct answer is C. The necessity of obtaining explicit patient authorization for any use or disclosure of protected health information, FI, that falls outside of standard treatment, payment, and healthcare operations, particularly for marketing purposes. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires navigating the complex interplay between patient privacy rights and the operational needs of a healthcare provider like UnitedHealth, all within the strict confines of U.S. federal regulations, specifically HIPAA. The core tension lies in balancing the imperative to protect protected health information, FI, with the necessity of using that information for legitimate business purposes, such as quality improvement and fraud prevention, which are critical for effective healthcare delivery and cost management. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any disclosure or use of PHI is strictly limited to what is necessary and authorized. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes obtaining explicit patient authorization for any use or disclosure of PHI beyond the standard permitted uses under HIPAA. This aligns with the fundamental principle of patient autonomy and the right to control one's own health information. By seeking authorization, UnitedHealth demonstrates a commitment to transparency and patient consent, which are cornerstones of ethical healthcare practice and regulatory compliance. This proactive step minimizes the risk of privacy breaches and fosters trust between the organization and its members. An incorrect approach that involves using PHI for marketing purposes without explicit patient authorization fails to adhere to HIPAA's stringent rules regarding marketing communications. HIPAA requires a specific authorization for marketing activities, distinguishing them from treatment, payment, and healthcare operations. Another incorrect approach, sharing PHI with a third-party vendor for a new service without a business associate agreement (BA) in place, directly violates HIPAA requirements for safeguarding PHI when it is shared with entities that perform functions on behalf of a covered entity. The absence of a BAA means there are no contractual assurances that the vendor will protect the PHI, creating a significant compliance risk. Finally, an approach that assumes all data aggregated for internal reporting is de-identified without a formal de-identification process and certification is a critical regulatory failure. HIPAA has specific standards for de-identification, and failure to meet these standards means the data may still be considered PHI, requiring appropriate safeguards and authorizations for its use. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the specific type of information being handled and its potential classification as PHI. Next, they must determine the intended purpose for using or disclosing this information and cross-reference it against the permitted uses and disclosures outlined in HIPAA. If the intended use falls outside these permitted categories, the next step is to assess whether patient authorization is required, and if so, to obtain it in the required format. For any third-party involvement, verifying the existence and adequacy of a business associate agreement is paramount. When dealing with data aggregation or analysis, a rigorous process for de-identification must be followed, ensuring compliance with HIPAA-specific standards for rendering data non-identifiable. This systematic approach ensures that all actions are grounded in regulatory requirements and ethical considerations. Question 8. When evaluating the process for sharing patient data for a new research initiative, what is the most compliant method to ensure protected health information, FI, is adequately protected under HIPAA regulations? Option A. Removing only obvious identifiers such as names and addresses, assuming this is sufficient for research purposes. Option B. Sharing the data with a third-party vendor without a formal business associate agreement that explicitly details de-identification responsibilities. Option C. Sharing the data directly with researchers, believing the research intent supersedes the need for formal de-identification. Option D. Implementing a robust de-identification process that adheres to either the statistical method or the safe harbor provisions outlined in the HIPAA privacy rule. The correct answer is D. Implementing a robust de-identification process that adheres to either the statistical method or the safe harbor provisions outlined in the HIPAA privacy rule. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in healthcare compliance, balancing the need for efficient data sharing to improve patient care with the stringent requirements of HIPAA for protecting protected health information. 5. The professional must navigate the complexities of de-identification, ensuring that the data shared for research purposes does not inadvertently re-identify individuals, which would constitute a significant HIPAA violation. The pressure to advance research can create a temptation to take shortcuts, making rigorous adherence to compliance protocols paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review and application of the HIPAA privacy rules de-identification standards. Specifically, it requires either a statistical method that renders the information not individually identifiable, or a safe harbor method, where specific identifiers are removed, and the covered entity has no knowledge that the information could be used to identify an individual. This approach ensures that the data shared for research is truly de-identified according to federal standards, thereby protecting patient privacy and avoiding regulatory penalties. It demonstrates a commitment to ethical data stewardship and compliance with legal obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on the assumption that removing common identifiers like names and addresses is sufficient. This fails to account for other unique data points that, when combined, could lead to re-identification, violating the HIPAA requirement for robust de-identification. This approach exhibits a lack of understanding of the comprehensive nature of PHI and the potential for indirect identification. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with data sharing without any formal de-identification process, believing that the research purpose inherently justifies the risk. This is a direct violation of HIPAA, which mandates specific safeguards for PHI, even when used for research. It demonstrates a disregard for patient privacy rights and legal mandates. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the de-identification process to a third-party vendor without establishing clear contractual obligations, business associate agreement, that specify HIPAA compliance requirements for de-identification and data handling. This can lead to a lack of oversight and accountability, potentially resulting in a breach of PHI and a violation of HIPAA business associate provisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach data de-identification with a risk-based mindset, prioritizing patient privacy and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the specific requirements of HIPAA de-identification standards, implementing appropriate technical and administrative safeguards, and ensuring that all parties involved in data handling are contractually bound to comply with these regulations. When in doubt, consulting with legal counsel or a compliance expert is crucial to ensure adherence to best practices and avoid potential violations. Question 9. Operational review demonstrates a potential vendor for a new patient portal system offers significant cost savings and advanced features. However, the vendor's documentation regarding their adherence to the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act (HIPAA) and the Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health (HITECH) Act is vague, relying primarily on self-attestation. The implementation timeline is aggressive. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance? Option A. Conduct a thorough due diligence process to verify the vendor's compliance with HIPAA and HITECH, including a review of their security practices, data handling policies, and a robust business associate agreement (BA). Option B. Focus solely on the technical functionality of the patient portal, assuming that a functional system inherently meets regulatory requirements for data protection. Option C. Prioritize the cost savings and advanced features, and implement the system with a note to revisit compliance requirements at a later date. Option D. Proceed with the vendor implementation as planned, assuming their self-attestation of compliance is sufficient, and address any potential compliance issues after the system is live. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough due diligence process to verify the vendor's compliance with HIPAA and HITECH, including a review of their security practices, data handling policies, and a robust business associate agreement (BA). Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to regulatory compliance, specifically concerning data privacy and security within the U.S. healthcare landscape. The pressure to quickly implement a new system, coupled with the potential for cost savings, can create a temptation to overlook or minimize the importance of thorough regulatory vetting. The professional challenge lies in ensuring that all necessary safeguards are in place to protect protected health information. 5. Without unduly delaying critical business operations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a comprehensive review of the vendor's compliance with HIPAA and HITECH Act regulations. This involves verifying the vendor's business associate agreement (BA) is robust, ensuring their security measures align with HIPAA security rule standards, e.g., administrative, physical, and technical safeguards, and confirming their data handling practices meet HIPAA privacy rule requirements. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core legal and ethical obligations to protect patient data. Failure to do so could result in significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and loss of patient trust, all of which are explicitly prohibited or mitigated by these regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the vendor based solely on their claims of compliance and the potential for cost savings. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement for due diligence under HIPAA. The law mandates that covered entities take reasonable steps to ensure their business associates protect PHI. Relying on self-certification without independent verification is a direct violation of this obligation. Another incorrect approach is to implement the system with a wait-and-see attitude regarding compliance, planning to address any issues later. This demonstrates a disregard for the proactive nature of HIPAA compliance. The regulations require that safeguards are in place before PHI is handled by a vendor. Post-implementation remediation is often insufficient and can still lead to violations if PHI has already been compromised. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the technical functionality of the new system without adequately assessing its security and privacy implications. While functionality is important, HIPAA primary concern is the protection of PHI. A system that is technically sound but lacks robust privacy and security controls is non-compliant and poses a significant risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach to vendor management. This involves identifying potential regulatory risks associated with any third-party vendor that will handle PHI. The decision-making process should include a thorough due diligence phase, focusing on the vendor's documented compliance with relevant regulations, HIPAA, high-tech. This should involve reviewing their policies, procedures, certifications, and contractual agreements like the BAA. If any gaps are identified, they must be addressed and remediate before engaging the vendor or granting them access to PHI. The ultimate decision should be based on a comprehensive assessment of compliance, security, and risk mitigation, not solely on cost or speed of implementation. Question 10. The assessment process reveals that a healthcare organization is implementing a new patient portal system designed to streamline access to medical records and appointment scheduling. While the IT department has focused on robust cybersecurity measures to protect the system from external breaches, there is a lack of clarity regarding how patient data within the portal will be used for internal analytics and reporting, and whether existing internal policies adequately address the specific requirements for handling protected health information, FI, under federal law. Which of the following approaches best ensures regulatory compliance and ethical data stewardship? Option A. Update the organization's data handling guidelines based on general industry best practices for digital health platforms, without a specific review against federal healthcare regulations. Option B. Rely on the existing general data privacy policy of the organization, assuming it covers all necessary aspects of patient information protection, and proceed with the portal's implementation. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the new patient portal's data handling practices against the specific requirements of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, including its privacy and security rules, to ensure all uses and disclosures of PHI are permissible and adequately protected. Option D. Focus primarily on enhancing the technical security of the patient portal to prevent unauthorized access, as this is the most critical aspect of protecting patient data. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive review of the new patient portal's data handling practices against the specific requirements of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, including its privacy and security rules, to ensure all uses and disclosures of PHI are permissible and adequately protected. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the interpretation and application of regulatory requirements within the context of a healthcare organization's operational processes. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for efficient data handling with the stringent mandates of patient privacy and data security, as defined by U.S. federal law. A misstep can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of patient trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure all actions align with the spirit and letter of the law. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a thorough understanding of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and its implications for protected health information, FI. It prioritizes a comprehensive review of existing data handling policies against current HIPAA regulations, specifically focusing on the privacy rule and security rule. This proactive and systematic review ensures that all data collection, storage, and transmission practices are compliant, thereby safeguarding patient privacy and data integrity. This represents best professional practice because it is grounded in a direct and accurate application of federal regulatory mandates designed to protect sensitive health information. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach fails to acknowledge the specific regulatory framework governing healthcare data in the U.S. It suggests a general data privacy policy without referencing or aligning with HIPAA, which is the definitive federal law. This is a critical regulatory failure, as it bypasses the established legal requirements for handling PHI, potentially leaving the organization vulnerable to violations. Another incorrect approach focuses solely on data security measures without adequately addressing the privacy aspects mandated by HIPAA. While security is a component of HIPAA, the privacy rule specifically dictates how PHI can be used and disclosed. Neglecting this aspect is a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it may lead to unauthorized disclosures or uses of patient information, even if the data is technically secure. A third incorrect approach relies on outdated guidelines or industry best practices that may not reflect the most current interpretations or enforcement priorities of HIPAA. This can lead to a false sense of compliance. The regulatory framework is dynamic, and staying current with its evolution is an ongoing professional responsibility. Failure to do so constitutes a regulatory oversight and a potential ethical lapse in due diligence. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the applicable regulatory jurisdiction, in this case, U.S. federal law, primarily HIPAA. They should then conduct a detailed assessment of current practices against the specific requirements of those regulations. This involves not just understanding the rules, but also actively seeking to implement and maintain compliance through regular reviews, training, and policy updates. When faced with ambiguity, consulting legal counsel or compliance experts specializing in healthcare regulations is a crucial step. The ultimate goal is to embed a culture of compliance that prioritizes patient rights and data protection. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new AI-driven diagnostic tool could significantly reduce diagnostic errors and improve patient outcomes, but also introduces new cybersecurity vulnerabilities that could expose sensitive patient data. Which approach best balances these competing factors while adhering to healthcare regulations? Option A. Proceed with the AI tool's implementation, focusing primarily on its diagnostic benefits, and address any cybersecurity concerns only if a data breach actually occurs. Option B. Adopt a phased implementation of the AI tool, focusing initially on non-sensitive patient data to gauge its effectiveness and security before full deployment, accepting a slower realization of benefits. Option C. Implement the AI tool after conducting a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential data breaches and patient safety risks, and developing robust mitigation strategies to protect patient data and ensure system integrity, even if it increases the initial implementation cost. Option D. Prioritize the immediate cost savings and potential for improved patient outcomes by implementing the AI tool quickly, deferring detailed cybersecurity risk assessments until after the system is operational. The correct answer is C. Implement the AI tool after conducting a thorough risk assessment that identifies potential data breaches and patient safety risks, and developing robust mitigation strategies to protect patient data and ensure system integrity, even if it increases the initial implementation cost. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new technology against its inherent risks, all within the stringent regulatory environment governing healthcare data and patient privacy. The decision-maker must not only understand the technical implications, but also the legal and ethical ramifications of implementing a system that could impact patient care and data security. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable regulations, such as HIPAA in the United States, while also optimizing operational efficiency and patient outcomes. The correct approach, which involves a comprehensive risk assessment that prioritizes patient safety and data privacy above immediate cost savings, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the core principles of healthcare ethics and regulatory mandates. Specifically under HIPAA, covered entities have a legal obligation to protect the privacy and security of protected health information. 5. A risk assessment that thoroughly identifies potential threats and vulnerabilities, evaluates their likelihood and impact, and implements appropriate safeguards is a direct requirement of the HIPAA security rule. Prioritizing patient safety and data privacy ensures that the organization acts in accordance with its fiduciary duty to patients and avoids potential legal penalties and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the cost savings without adequately addressing the identified risks would be professionally unacceptable. This failure would constitute a violation of the HIPAA security rules requirement for a thorough risk analysis and the subsequent implementation of security measures. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for patient well-being and privacy, potentially leading to data breaches, identity theft, and compromised patient care. Another incorrect approach that overemphasizes the potential benefits of the technology while downplaying or ignoring the identified risks also fails to meet regulatory and ethical standards. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold the organization's responsibility to protect sensitive patient information. Such an approach could lead to significant financial penalties, loss of patient trust, and legal liabilities. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes 1. Identifying all potential risks associated with the proposed change, considering technical, operational, legal, and ethical dimensions. 2. Assessing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 3. Evaluating the potential benefits against the identified risks and their mitigation costs. 4. Developing and implementing a risk mitigation plan that prioritizes the most critical risks, particularly those impacting patient safety and data privacy. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment and mitigation strategies as circumstances evolve. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and ethically sound, safeguarding both the organization and its patients. Question 12. The assessment process reveals that a new AI-powered diagnostic tool is being considered for implementation across several UnitedHealth Group facilities. While the tool promises to enhance diagnostic accuracy and potentially reduce operational costs, concerns have been raised regarding its impact on patient data privacy and the security of the information processed by the AI. What is the most appropriate initial step to ensure compliance with relevant U.S. healthcare regulations and best practices for risk management? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities and threats to patient data and system integrity, and develop mitigation strategies. Option B. Initiate a pilot program in a single facility to observe its performance and address any identified risks after the pilot concludes. Option C. Rely on the vendor's assurances regarding the security and privacy features of the AI tool without conducting an independent review. Option D. Proceed with the implementation of the AI tool immediately to realize cost savings and address any potential data privacy issues as they arise. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential vulnerabilities and threats to patient data and system integrity, and develop mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment principles within the context of healthcare operations, specifically focusing on the potential impact of a new technology on patient care and data security. The challenge lies in balancing the benefits of innovation with the imperative to protect patient privacy and ensure the integrity of health information, all while adhering to stringent regulatory requirements. Careful judgment is needed to identify and evaluate risks comprehensively, rather than making assumptions or relying on incomplete information. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it mandates a systematic and thorough risk assessment process. This involves identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities, analyzing their likelihood and impact, and developing appropriate mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, in the United States, which requires covered entities to implement administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic protected health information (EFI). A proactive and documented risk assessment process is a cornerstone of HIPAA compliance and demonstrates a commitment to patient safety and data security. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the potential cost savings of the new technology fails to adequately consider the significant risks to patient privacy and data security. This oversight would violate HIPAA security rule, which mandates risk analysis to identify potential risks and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of ePHI. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the vendor's assurances without independent verification ignores the due diligence required by regulations. This could lead to the adoption of a system with unaddressed security flaws, exposing the organization and its patients to breaches. A third incorrect approach that delays the risk assessment until after implementation is fundamentally flawed. Regulations like HIPAA require risk assessment to be an ongoing process, and conducting it post-implementation means potential risks have already materialized, increasing the likelihood of a breach and non-compliance. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a comprehensive, documented, and ongoing risk assessment process. This involves 1. Defining the scope of the assessment, including all systems and data that will be affected by the new technology. 2. Identifying all potential risks, including those related to data breaches, unauthorized access, system downtime, and patient safety. 3. Analyzing the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 4. Developing and implementing a risk management plan with specific controls and mitigation strategies. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment to account for changes in technology, threats, and regulatory requirements. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, compliant, and prioritize the protection of patient information and well-being. Question 13. Market research demonstrates that a healthcare provider is experiencing an increase in reported data breaches, primarily attributed to phishing attacks. The organization is considering implementing a new security awareness training program and upgrading its email filtering system. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework for assessing and mitigating risks to protected health information? 5. Option A. Focus security investments solely on addressing the most prevalent threat, phishing attacks, by implementing advanced email filtering and mandatory annual security awareness training for all staff. Option B. Prioritize risk mitigation efforts by implementing the least expensive security controls that offer some level of protection against common threats, ensuring the organization remains compliant with basic data protection requirements. Option C. Rely on industry-standard security best practices for healthcare organizations to guide the implementation of security controls, assuming these practices will adequately protect all forms of PHI. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify all potential threats and vulnerabilities to ePHI, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and then implement security measures to reduce risks to a reasonable and appropriate level, including but not limited to enhanced training and improved filtering. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify all potential threats and vulnerabilities to ePHI, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and then implement security measures to reduce risks to a reasonable and appropriate level, including but not limited to enhanced training and improved filtering. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment within the context of healthcare operations, specifically concerning patient data security. The challenge lies in balancing the need for operational efficiency and data utilization with the paramount obligation to protect protected health information. 5. As mandated by U.S. federal law, primarily the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA. A superficial approach to risk assessment could lead to significant compliance failures, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate potential threats and vulnerabilities effectively. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and systematic risk assessment process that aligns with HIPAA security rule requirements. This process necessitates identifying all potential threats and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of electronic PHI, EFI. It requires evaluating the likelihood of these threats occurring and the potential impact of such an occurrence. Based on this evaluation, appropriate security measures must be implemented to reduce risks to a reasonable and appropriate level. This aligns with the HIPAA security rules mandate for covered entities and business associates to conduct a thorough risk analysis and implement security measures to protect EPHI. This proactive and documented approach demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to patient privacy. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on the most obvious or frequently reported threats, without a systematic identification of all potential vulnerabilities, represents a failure to conduct a comprehensive risk analysis as required by HIPAA. This can leave the organization exposed to less common but potentially severe risks. Implementing security measures based on industry best practices without a specific risk assessment tailored to the organization's unique environment and data flows is also problematic. While industry best practices are valuable, they may not adequately address specific risks present within the organization, leading to gaps in protection. Prioritizing risk mitigation efforts based solely on the cost of implementing controls, without a thorough assessment of the likelihood and impact of the risk, can lead to under-resourcing critical security measures. HIPAA requires risks to be reduced to a reasonable and appropriate level, not necessarily the cheapest level. This approach could result in accepting unacceptable levels of risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach risk assessment by first understanding the regulatory landscape, particularly HIPAA in this context. They should then adopt a structured methodology for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks. This involves documenting the entire process, including the rationale for decisions made regarding risk mitigation. A continuous monitoring and review process is also crucial, as threats and vulnerabilities evolve. When faced with a risk assessment scenario, professionals should ask: 1. Have we identified all potential threats and vulnerabilities to PHI? 2. Have we accurately assessed the likelihood and impact of these risks? 3. Are the chosen mitigation strategies proportionate to the identified risks and compliant with HIPAA? 4. Is the entire process documented and auditable? Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates a capacity to flag any deviation from preset operational thresholds, but its output is a raw list of anomalies requiring manual interpretation to determine potential risks. Option A. The system's effectiveness is limited as it requires significant manual effort to translate raw data into actionable risk insights, potentially delaying critical interventions. Option B. The system is effective because it identifies deviations, which is the first step in risk management. Option C. The system is highly effective due to its ability to process large volumes of data and generate alerts rapidly. Option D. The system is effective as long as it meets the minimum requirements for data logging as stipulated by industry standards. The correct answer is B. The system is effective because it identifies deviations, which is the first step in risk management. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the assessment of a monitoring system's effectiveness in identifying potential risks within a healthcare organization. The challenge lies in distinguishing between a system that merely flags anomalies and one that actively facilitates a robust risk assessment process, aligning with regulatory expectations for patient safety and operational integrity. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for false positives or negatives, which could lead to either unnecessary resource allocation or missed critical risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves evaluating the monitoring system's ability to provide actionable insights that directly inform the risk assessment process. This means the system should not only detect deviations, but also offer context, trend analysis, and potential root cause indicators. This aligns with regulatory frameworks such as the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, guidelines, which mandate proactive risk management to protect patient data and ensure quality of care. A system that facilitates this proactive identification and analysis is essential for demonstrating compliance and fostering a culture of continuous improvement. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to consider the monitoring system effective solely because it generates alerts for any deviation from established parameters. This fails to acknowledge that not all deviations represent significant risks, and a system that doesn't help prioritize or contextualize these alerts can lead to alert fatigue and inefficient resource allocation. Ethically, this approach could lead to overlooking genuine risks while chasing minor anomalies, potentially impacting patient safety or data security. Another incorrect approach would be to focus only on the technical sophistication of the monitoring system, such as its speed or the volume of data it can process, without assessing its contribution to the actual risk assessment process. This overlooks the core purpose of such a system within a healthcare organization, which is to support informed decision-making regarding risk mitigation. Regulatory bodies expect systems to be integrated into the overall risk management framework, not just operate in isolation. A third incorrect approach would be to assume that the monitoring system is adequate if it meets basic compliance requirements for data logging, without considering its proactive risk identification capabilities. Compliance with basic logging does not equate to effective risk management. Regulations emphasize a forward-looking approach to identifying and mitigating potential threats, which requires more than just retrospective data recording. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this by first understanding the organization's specific risk landscape and regulatory obligations. The monitoring system should be evaluated against its ability to detect, analyze, and report on risks relevant to patient safety, data privacy, and operational efficiency. The decision-making process should involve assessing how the system's outputs are integrated into the organization's formal risk assessment and management protocols. This includes considering whether the system supports the identification of trends, patterns, and potential root causes, thereby enabling proactive intervention rather than reactive responses. The ultimate goal is to ensure the system enhances the organization's ability to manage risks effectively and compliantly. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates a recurring concern regarding the clarity of post-discharge instructions provided to patients. While this feedback has been raised by several patient advocacy groups over the past quarter, the specific instances cited are anecdotal and lack quantifiable data on adverse events directly attributable to these instructions. How should the risk management team prioritize and address this feedback? Option A. Disregard the feedback as anecdotal and focus resources on risks with documented adverse event data. Option B. Immediately revise all patient discharge instruction materials across all service lines to ensure maximum clarity, regardless of the specific nature of the feedback. Option C. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the feedback, assessing the potential impact on patient outcomes and the likelihood of recurrence, and develop targeted mitigation strategies based on the findings. Option D. Log the feedback as a low-priority item, as there is no quantifiable data linking it to adverse events, and revisit it only if more concrete evidence emerges. Correct answer is C. Conduct a thorough root cause analysis of the feedback, assessing the potential impact on patient outcomes and the likelihood of recurrence, and develop targeted mitigation strategies based on the findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for proactive risk identification with the practical constraints of resource allocation and the potential for over-analysis. Stakeholder feedback, while valuable, can sometimes be vague or conflicting, necessitating careful interpretation and prioritization. The challenge lies in translating qualitative feedback into actionable risk assessments without becoming paralyzed by an exhaustive and potentially unproductive list of every conceivable risk. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of evaluating the identified risks based on their potential impact and likelihood. This aligns with best professional practices in risk management, which emphasize a structured and objective assessment. By categorizing risks and prioritizing those with the highest potential for negative consequences, an organization can allocate resources effectively to mitigation efforts. This approach is ethically sound, as it demonstrates a commitment to safeguarding the organization and its stakeholders by addressing the most significant threats first. From a regulatory perspective, while specific U.S. healthcare regulations might not dictate a precise risk assessment methodology, they generally require organizations to have robust risk management programs in place to ensure patient safety and operational integrity. A tiered approach to risk assessment is a widely accepted standard for fulfilling these broader regulatory expectations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately escalating every piece of stakeholder feedback as a critical risk without initial evaluation. This fails to demonstrate professional judgment and can lead to inefficient resource allocation, overwhelming the risk management team with low-priority issues. Ethically, it can create unnecessary alarm and distrust among stakeholders if minor concerns are treated with the same urgency as major threats. Regulatory failure here lies in the lack of a structured and proportionate response, which could be seen as a deficiency in a risk management program designed to protect patient care and financial stability. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss feedback that is not immediately quantifiable or does not align with pre-existing risk registers. This can lead to overlooking emerging or novel risks that may not fit neatly into established categories. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of adaptability and a failure to embrace a comprehensive view of risk. Ethically, it could result in harm if unquantified risks materialize. Regulatory noncompliance could arise if this leads to a failure to identify and mitigate risks that are reasonably foreseeable and could impact patient safety or financial solvency. It's often implied by regulations like the Affordable Care Act's focus on quality and safety. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on the frequency of feedback without considering the potential severity of the underlying issue. While frequent feedback on a minor issue might indicate a process inefficiency, it does not necessarily represent a critical risk to the organization. This approach lacks the analytical depth required for effective risk management. Professionally, it is a superficial assessment. Ethically, it could divert resources from more significant threats. Regulatory implications include a potential failure to prioritize and address risks that, while perhaps less frequently mentioned, could have a catastrophic impact, thus failing to meet the spirit of regulations requiring diligent risk oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework that begins with understanding the source and nature of stakeholder feedback. This involves active listening and seeking clarification. The next step is to categorize the feedback into potential risk areas. Subsequently, a qualitative or semi-quantitative assessment of impact and likelihood should be performed. This allows for the prioritization of risks, enabling the development of targeted mitigation strategies. This iterative process ensures that resources are used effectively and that the organization remains responsive to evolving threats while adhering to ethical obligations and regulatory expectations for robust risk management. Question 16. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess potential operational risks within UnitedHealth's claims processing division. Given the dynamic nature of healthcare regulations and evolving fraud schemes, which risk assessment approach best balances the need for comprehensive analysis with the imperative for timely identification and mitigation of emerging threats? Option A. Relying exclusively on historical claims data analysis to identify patterns of past operational failures and fraud. Option B. Prioritizing speed of assessment by using broad, generalized risk categories without detailed investigation into specific vulnerabilities. Option C. Conducting a one-time, in-depth risk assessment focused only on the most frequently occurring historical risk events. Option D. Employing a scenario-based risk assessment that models potential future disruptions and their impact, alongside a continuous monitoring system for early warning signs of new risks. The correct answer is D. Employing a scenario-based risk assessment that models potential future disruptions and their impact, alongside a continuous monitoring system for early warning signs of new risks. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a nuanced understanding of risk assessment methodologies within the context of healthcare operations, specifically for a large insurer like UnitedHealth. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate approach when faced with incomplete or evolving data, balancing the need for timely decision-making with the imperative of thoroughness and regulatory compliance. The professional must consider not only the technical aspects of risk assessment, but also the ethical implications of decisions that could impact patient care, financial stability, and regulatory standing. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive and adaptive risk management strategy. By focusing on identifying potential vulnerabilities and implementing controls before significant issues arise, it aligns with the principles of sound governance and operational efficiency expected of regulated entities. This approach is ethically sound as it aims to mitigate risks that could negatively affect members and the organization. From a regulatory perspective, it demonstrates a commitment to compliance with frameworks that mandate robust risk management programs, such as those overseen by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, or other relevant U.S. health insurance regulations, which emphasize proactive identification and mitigation of risks to ensure quality of care and financial integrity. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical data without considering emerging trends or future projections fails to adequately address the dynamic nature of healthcare risks. This could lead to a false sense of security and leave the organization vulnerable to unforeseen events, potentially violating regulatory expectations for forward-looking risk management. Another incorrect approach that overemphasizes the most probable risks while neglecting less likely but high-impact events ignores the principles of comprehensive risk assessment. This can result in a failure to prepare for catastrophic scenarios, which could have severe consequences for the organization and its members, and may contraindicate regulatory requirements for business continuity and disaster preparedness. An approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy, leading to superficial analysis, risks making decisions based on flawed assumptions. This can result in misallocation of resources, ineffective control implementation, and ultimately, a failure to meet regulatory obligations for effective risk management. The professional decision-making process should involve a systematic evaluation of available information, consideration of the organization's risk appetite, and an understanding of the regulatory landscape. Professionals should employ a tiered approach to risk assessment, starting with broad identification and then drilling down into specific areas. They should continuously monitor for changes in the internal and external environment and be prepared to adapt their assessment and mitigation strategies accordingly. Collaboration with subject matter experts across different departments is crucial to ensure a holistic view of potential risks. Question 17. Operational review demonstrates that a team is tasked with preparing aggregated patient data for a public health research initiative. The team has removed patient names, addresses, and social security numbers from the dataset. However, the research initiative requires data that is sufficiently de-identified to prevent re-identification of any individual, as per federal regulations. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with these requirements? Option A. Implement a formal de-identification process that adheres to either the HIPAA safe harbor method or the expert determination method, ensuring all 18 identifiers are addressed or certified by a qualified expert. Option B. Have the data analytics team internally review the dataset and make a subjective determination of whether it appears sufficiently anonymized. Option C. Rely on the aggregation of data to a broad geographic region, assuming this inherently makes the data unidentifiable. Option D. Remove only the most obvious direct identifiers, such as names and phone numbers, as this is generally sufficient for most research purposes. The correct answer is A. Implement a formal de-identification process that adheres to either the HIPAA safe harbor method or the expert determination method, ensuring all 18 identifiers are addressed or certified by a qualified expert. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the imperative to protect sensitive patient information, as mandated by HIPAA. The core difficulty lies in identifying and implementing appropriate de-identification methods that render data unusable for identifying individuals, while retaining its analytical value for population health insights. The pressure to deliver timely reports can tempt shortcuts, but regulatory compliance and patient privacy are paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of HIPAA safe harbor or expert determination methods for de-identification. This ensures that the data is stripped of all 18 identifiers or that a qualified expert has certified its de-identification. This aligns with the core principles of HIPAA, specifically the privacy rule, which permits the use and disclosure of de-identified health information for research and public health purposes, provided it meets specific standards. This method upholds patient trust and avoids potential breaches of privacy, which carry significant legal and reputational consequences. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves simply removing direct identifiers like names and addresses. This fails to meet HIPAA standards because indirect identifiers, e.g., specific dates of service, rare diagnoses combined with geographic information, can still lead to re-identification. This constitutes a violation of the HIPAA privacy rule, specifically the requirements for de-identification. Another incorrect approach is to rely on internal, non-expert staff to determine what constitutes sufficiently anonymized data without a defined methodology. This lacks the rigor and objectivity required by HIPAA, which emphasizes either a safe harbor method or an expert determination. This approach risks accidental disclosure of protected health information, FI, and a failure to comply with the privacy rules de-identification provisions. A third incorrect approach is to assume that data aggregated to a very high level e.g., national statistics, is inherently de-identified without a formal process. While aggregation reduces risk, HIPAA still requires a formal de-identification process to ensure that no combination of remaining data points could reasonably identify an individual. This bypasses the established regulatory requirements for de-identification. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach data de-identification by first consulting the specific HIPAA regulations, 45 CFR Part 164, Subpart E, regarding the privacy rule and de-identification standards. They should then choose between the safe harbor method, listing the 18 identifiers to be removed, or the expert determination method. If safe harbor is chosen, a systematic process for removing all listed identifiers must be implemented and documented. If expert determination is chosen, engaging a qualified independent expert is crucial. Regular training on HIPAA requirements and data privacy best practices is essential for all staff handling PHI. Documentation of the de-identification process and any expert certifications is critical for audit readiness. Question 18. The assessment process reveals that a healthcare provider contracted with UnitedHealth has identified a pattern of billing errors that have resulted in overpayments to Medicare beneficiaries. The provider has been aware of these overpayments for approximately 45 days, but has not yet reported them to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and compliant course of action for the provider? Option A. Offset the amount of the overpayment against future claims submitted to UnitedHealth without formally reporting it to CMS. Option B. Wait to report the overpayments until UnitedHealth initiates an audit or requests information regarding billing discrepancies. Option C. Conceal the overpayments and do not report them to CMS, assuming they will not be discovered. Option D. Promptly report the identified overpayments to CMS within the 60-day timeframe as mandated by the False Claims Act. Correct answer is D. Promptly report the identified overpayments to CMS within the 60-day timeframe as mandated by the False Claims Act. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in healthcare compliance, where a provider's billing practices may inadvertently lead to overpayments due to a misunderstanding of complex coding guidelines. The professional challenge lies in balancing the need to rectify the error promptly with the potential financial and reputational implications for the provider and the health plan. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with federal regulations while maintaining a fair and accurate billing system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent reporting of the identified overpayment to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, within the mandated 60-day timeframe, as required by the False Claims Act, FCA, and its implementing regulations, specifically the 60-day rule. This demonstrates a commitment to compliance, good faith efforts to correct errors, and adherence to legal obligations. Prompt reporting mitigates potential penalties and fosters trust with regulatory bodies. Incorrect approaches analysis. Reporting the overpayment only when specifically requested by UnitedHealth, or after a significant delay, fails to meet the 60-day reporting requirement under the FCA. This inaction could be construed as knowingly retaining overpayments, which is a violation of the FCA and can lead to significant penalties, including treble damages and per-claim fines. It also demonstrates a lack of proactive compliance and a failure to uphold ethical responsibilities to government healthcare programs. Failing to report the overpayment altogether constitutes a deliberate concealment of a known overpayment, which is a direct violation of the FCA and a serious ethical breach. This can result in severe legal consequences, including civil monetary penalties and exclusion from federal healthcare programs. It undermines the integrity of the healthcare system and demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations. Attempting to offset the overpayment against future claims without proper reporting and reconciliation with CMS is also problematic. While offsetting may seem like a practical solution, it bypasses the required reporting mechanism and may not accurately account for the full extent of the overpayment or its specific nature, potentially leading to further compliance issues and an incomplete resolution of the identified error. Professional reasoning. Professionals should establish robust internal compliance programs that include regular audits of billing and coding practices. When potential overpayments are identified, a clear protocol should be in place for immediate investigation, quantification, and reporting to the appropriate government agency, CMS in this case, within the legally mandated timeframe. This protocol should involve legal counsel and compliance officers to ensure accurate reporting and adherence to all applicable regulations, including the False Claims Act and its 60-day rule. Transparency and prompt action are paramount in maintaining compliance and ethical standards. Question 19. System analysis indicates that a healthcare organization is planning a pilot program to analyze patient treatment pathways to identify opportunities for improving care quality. To facilitate this analysis, they intend to use historical patient data. What is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with U.S. healthcare privacy regulations while enabling the program's objectives? Option A. Utilize the raw, unedited patient data directly in the pilot program to ensure the most accurate and complete analysis for identifying care quality improvements. Option B. Implement a comprehensive de-identification process based on a thorough risk assessment, adhering to either HIPAA safe harbor or expert determination methods, ensuring the data is sufficiently de-identified to prevent re-identification while retaining analytical utility. Option C. Apply an extremely rigorous de-identification process that removes all potentially identifying information, even if it renders the data largely unusable for the intended analysis of care quality improvements. Option D. Remove only the most obvious patient identifiers, such as names and addresses, before using the data for analysis, assuming this is sufficient for privacy protection. Correct answer is B. Implement a comprehensive de-identification process based on a thorough risk assessment, adhering to either HIPAA safe harbor or expert determination methods, ensuring the data is sufficiently de-identified to prevent re-identification while retaining analytical utility. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for efficient data processing with the imperative to protect sensitive patient information, as mandated by U.S. healthcare regulations. The core tension lies in determining the appropriate level of de-identification for data used in a pilot program aimed at improving patient outcomes. A misstep could lead to privacy breaches, regulatory penalties, and erosion of patient trust. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough risk assessment to determine the appropriate de-identification methods. This aligns with the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA privacy rule, specifically the requirements for protected health information. 5. HIPAA permits the use and disclosure of de-identified health information for research and other purposes, but it outlines specific standards for de-identification. The safe harbor method requires removing 18 specific identifiers, while the expert determination method involves a statistician certifying that the risk of re-identification is very small. A robust risk assessment ensures that the chosen method adequately protects patient privacy while still allowing for the intended analysis, thereby upholding both regulatory compliance and ethical obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves using the raw patient data without any de-identification. This is a direct violation of HIPAA, as it constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of PHI. The privacy rule strictly prohibits the use or disclosure of PHI unless specifically permitted or authorized. Another incorrect approach is to apply a superficial de-identification method, such as simply removing patient names, without considering other potential identifiers that could lead to re-identification. This fails to meet the standards set by HIPAA for de-identification, whether using the safe harbor or expert determination methods. It creates a false sense of security while still exposing patients to privacy risks. A third incorrect approach is to over-de-identify the data to the point where it becomes unusable for the intended purpose of improving patient outcomes. While privacy is paramount, the data must retain sufficient utility to achieve the program's objectives. This approach, while seemingly protective, undermines the very goal of the pilot program and may not be the most efficient or effective use of resources, potentially failing to meet the spirit of regulations that encourage the use of health information for improvement. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a systematic approach to data handling that prioritizes patient privacy and regulatory compliance. This involves understanding the specific requirements of relevant legislation, such as HIPAA in the U.S. When dealing with PHI, a risk-based assessment is crucial. This means identifying potential privacy risks, evaluating the likelihood and impact of re-identification, and selecting de-identification methods that mitigate these risks effectively. Professionals should consult with legal and privacy experts when in doubt and ensure that all data handling practices are documented and auditable. The decision-making process should always begin with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations, followed by an assessment of the operational needs and the potential impact on all stakeholders. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate a need to share patient outcome data with an external research consortium to identify trends in treatment efficacy. The consortium has requested access to individual patient records, including names and specific treatment details, to facilitate their analysis. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with federal healthcare regulations? Option A. Share the raw patient data immediately, as the research is for the benefit of improving patient care. Option B. Deny the request outright, citing the inability to share any patient-level data due to privacy concerns. Option C. De-identify the patient records by removing all direct and indirect identifiers before sharing them with the consortium, and ensure the consortium has appropriate data use agreements in place. Option D. Provide the requested individual patient records after obtaining a written commitment from the consortium to maintain confidentiality. The correct answer is D. Provide the requested individual patient records after obtaining a written commitment from the consortium to maintain confidentiality. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for timely and accurate information with the imperative to protect sensitive patient data. The complexity arises from the potential for unauthorized disclosure of protected health information, FI, while attempting to fulfill a legitimate request for data that could improve care delivery. Professionals must navigate HIPAA regulations, specifically the privacy rule and security rule, to ensure compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing patient privacy and data security as mandated by HIPAA. It involves a structured process of de-identification or aggregation of data to remove direct identifiers before sharing. This aligns with the HIPAA privacy rules provisions for using and disclosing PHI for research or quality improvement purposes when appropriate safeguards are in place. The emphasis on obtaining necessary authorizations or ensuring data is de-identified before sharing is a direct application of regulatory requirements designed to prevent breaches and maintain patient trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately providing the raw patient-level data without any form of de-identification or authorization. This directly violates the HIPAA privacy rule by disclosing PHI without a valid basis, exposing the organization to significant penalties, reputational damage, and potential legal action. It fails to implement the necessary safeguards required by the HIPAA security rule to protect electronic PHI. Another incorrect approach is to completely deny the request without exploring de-identification or aggregation options. Caution is necessary. An outright denial without considering compliant alternatives can hinder valuable quality improvement initiatives and may not be in the best interest of patient care, potentially conflicting with the spirit of healthcare improvement objectives. It misses an opportunity to leverage data responsibly. A third incorrect approach is to rely on informal verbal assurances from the requesting party that the data will be handled securely. HIPAA requires documented policies and procedures, business associate agreements, if applicable, and robust technical and administrative safeguards. Informal assurances do not meet these stringent regulatory requirements and leave the organization vulnerable to breaches and noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such requests by first understanding the specific purpose of the data request and the nature of the data required. They should then consult internal policies and procedures related to data sharing and HIPAA compliance. The next step involves assessing whether the data can be shared in a de-identified or aggregated format that removes PHI. If direct identifiers are necessary, the process must involve obtaining appropriate patient authorizations or ensuring the request falls under a specific HIPAA exception. e.g., for public health activities, research with IRB approval. Documenting the entire process, including the rationale for the chosen method of data sharing and any approvals obtained, is crucial for demonstrating compliance and mitigating risk.